Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our Forestry Community Update. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Danielle Fitzko. I'm the Director of Forests in the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation. Our team at Forest Parks and Recreation pulled together this Forestry Community Update because, as you know, we are not in normal times and we are not coming together like we would traditionally with you at partner meetings to share updates. And since we can't do that right now, we thought we'd pull together our team and share what's going on. In the communication medium of the year, a web-based medium. In order to give you updates across all of our programs, we have a packed agenda and several presenters. It's kind of going to go rapid fire or perhaps speed dating, but we thought it was in our best to have the commissioner and our program leads shared directly with you than to have one person deliver it all. So while it may be a little clunky during the transitions, and I have to actually advance the slides for our team, which I know is very old school, but we hope hearing from all of our program leads and connecting with our team is worth the clunkiness of this. Before I get into who's on the agenda, I did want to give you a little bit of an update on logistics. As a participant in the meeting, your microphones will be muted. However, we do want to hear from you. So please use the question box in your GoToMeeting slide panel and type your question for us there. We'll do our best to answer them during the course of the meeting or at the end, where we hope to be able to answer some questions live. We'll make sure we connect with you afterwards if we're not able to get to your questions. And of course, we'd like to have more discussion and wish we were there with you in person. So as always, feel free to reach out to us and we're happy to talk to you anytime. Our lineup for our meeting today is first is gonna be Michael Snyder, Commissioner Snyder and State Forester. He's gonna give you a legislative and department updates. We'll have Paul Frederick from our Forest Economy Program, Kathy Decker from Forest Protection, Nate McKean from State Lands. We'll have Keith Thompson from Private Lands, Elise Shadler, Urban and Community Forestry, and Dave Wilcox from Watershed Forestry. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Commissioner Snyder.
Thanks, Danny. I'm happy to join you all here. I'm going to trust that I am live and audible, and if not visible as well, even though all I can see is, as usual, is my own screen here. So thanks for the intro, Danny. Thanks for the team for gathering and pulling together these updates, and for your overview, Danny. And thanks to everyone for joining us. Unfortunately, I don't have a presentation to advance slides, but instead I'm just going to give a little bit of a legislative and policy update that kind of looks back on what happened in the historic session that ended the last biennium, and then look ahead to what we might expect in the session about to begin in January. Before I do, I do want to comment and hope that share my hopes that folks are faring well, staying healthy as can be, and dealing with this historic time and the challenges that come with it. Thanks to everyone for being flexible, patient, understanding with the changes and the way they've affected our operations and our availability, needing to go virtual and changing field work, etc. I think we were all pretty lucky to have a relatively good summer, it seems. Now with various surges of the coronavirus and concerns for what might be ahead, at the same time seeing vaccines in the offing. Hope we can just kind of hang together, continue to do what we've done as a Vermont community writ large, and weather this thing and come out the other side in better shape. And I do believe that some of what we talk about here at FPR, especially in terms of our forested landscape, working lands, wildlands even, and our recreational infrastructure, that like to think that we're part of the recovery and helps keep Vermont strong, and that will be part of allowing us to rebound on the other side. So I just wanted to begin with an acknowledgement that these are strange and difficult times for everyone. And I hope those of you who are out there whatever your involvement in the forestry community, that you're faring well enough, and please continue to be in touch as needed and as you wish. We're always available. So including creating opportunities like this, which we'll continue to do into the future as needed, adapt to the virtual realities and hope that they can work. So with that, I will just kind of give a quick status report. I guess before I give the update of what went down legislatively in terms of policy last year, so much has been dominated by the pandemic and our response to it, and kind of adjusting. There's been an awful lot of work to do so. I'm very proud of our folks throughout FPR for the way they responded. You can imagine, particularly field-based staff were like caged animals way back in April when there was a shutdown and we wanted to get out and do the work. Folks responded well, and then in time we kind of managed to follow the governor's guidance and start doing more and more. And I just want to give a shout out to those folks for their perseverance and creativity in delivering on our work with partners and all. Many of you attending here. And in particular, the response to the Federal CARES Act money and creating a grant program for the forest economy stabilization grants, $5 million in grants to forest-based businesses, a team of FPR folks led by then Deputy Commissioner Lincoln to stand up that program and get money out the door in a rapid way and get assistance to Vermonters. And frankly, going all the way back to the beginning when we managed to get forestry operations as considered to be essential. So I just want to give a nod to looking back to what we've been through together and thank folks for doing it. And which leads me to new developments this fall. And after the special summer session and the early fall session of the legislature, and then the conclusion of the elections, where Governor Scott was reelected, Sam Lincoln announced his resignation and to return to private work. And I just want to publicly thank Sam, as well as letting folks know who may not have heard that Sam, who spent 4 years here as our deputy commissioner, providing incredibly valuable service through his perspective, experience, and immense talents. It's a big hole to fill. So I want to thank Sam for what he's provided, wish him well in his return to private enterprise. And I wanted to report to you all that those are big shoes to fill, and we're working on a plan to do so, which would essentially provide some new capacity to replace Sam in our what would be a newly reorganized section or program within FPR, which has long been known as Marketing, Utilization, and Development, or Wood Utilization and Energy, which Paul Frederick has led for years now. We're just kind of retool that into our Forest Economy program. Paul will be its lead as program manager, building on his long years in the forest economy and providing support. And then looking to bring on a new forest economy specialist to mentor with Paul and provide a new capacity to kind of institutionalize the work that Sam did in support of our efforts as prioritizing rural development through the forest economy. So that's one piece of it. We're also looking to replace some of Sam's work with an exempt position within the commissioner's office to help with internal operations, and that's still in process, but that's more inside. Really happy to say that we'll be pursuing some approvals for hiring during a hiring freeze to replace this capacity in our efforts to support the forest economy. So that's the deputy commissioner update there. And then I'd move on to give a quick report and recounting of the session past. It was really dominated by work related to Act 250 reform and modernization, coming on the heels of the Act 250 commission that was looking at the future of Act 250 at 50 years old, a statewide tour and listening sessions and a report, lots of hearings. The short version here is that whereas a comprehensive reform package had been introduced in January last winter with a lot of interest and a lot of movement, ultimately what passed through both chambers was very much slimmed down to simply including forest fragmentation language, basically criteria to consider forest blocks and habitat connectors in Act 250, and a provision to consider an alternative to Act 250 for oversight of recreational trails. That's what passed, and everything else has been left by the wayside in one form or another along the way. And the governor vetoed that bill because less because of what was in it, the forest frag criteria and the trails provisions, but as was said at the time, for what's not in it, the modernization of the process, the professionalization of the board, some other tweaks to Act 250 jurisdiction, including notably reforms for forest enterprises, businesses that add value to forest products, to seek relief and change and modernization of permit conditions within Act 250 that had been passed through parts but didn't make it all the way. And so that was a long epic that ended in a veto for those reasons. I'm being fairly brief here and trying to be concise, but I hope that covers it. We can cover questions as you need. So that really dominated the session. Meanwhile, we did actually propose and had great work in the House Ag and Forestry Committee with us and partners on proposals to modernize the tree warden statutes that really hadn't undergone much in the way of change since the early 1900s, with one tweak in the 60s, I believe. The result was a lot of confusion and lack of clarity and conflict even within existing statutes about responsibilities, roles, rights. When you're talking about, private trees in a public right of way, it was causing legal litigation arguments and potential fines. And when we were asked to help with those legal challenges in certain communities, we found that we couldn't even give good guidance because the statutes were such a mess. So thanks to Danny and Elise in particular, and their relationships with tree wardens around the state, and working closely with the League of Cities and Towns, which had great interest in getting this right, we landed in a great place, and with good work of an active committee, really polished up a good bill, it sailed through the House, a reform to the tree warden statutes. And then kind of remarkably at the end of the last session in September, the Senate passed it through in concurrence, and we have now changed the tree warden laws and added clarity and consistency and predictability. And Elise and others can speak to what we're doing to push information out and offer towns the chance to collaborate on developing shade tree preservation plans, which are allowed for and called for within the new legislation. So that's the tree warden bill, and we're happy to have gotten that done after a few years of trying and a surprisingly complicated bit of legislation. And thanks to all who worked on it and cooperated. And then other than that, there was also, there continues to be great interest last session in the prospects of, in a climate change context, the prospects of looking to forests as part of the solution, specifically in enabling and facilitating the ability of private landowners and state lands to be enrolled in carbon offset projects to sell carbon credits for the storage and sequestration values that forests provide in a quantified way in a marketplace. So there's great interest in having the state, for example, enroll state lands to help facilitate private lands enrollment, overcome various barriers. So there's continuing interest in this. And because of COVID and the shutdown and difficulties, legislation was withdrawn, and instead a request was made of me as commissioner to report back in January on progress made following the Forest Carbon Sequestration Working Group that was conducted the previous year and delivered a report last January. So we'll be reporting on our efforts to share information with Vermonters, provide technical assistance about their options, continue to explore the feasibility of enrolling state lands, et cetera. And we will do so. I just want folks to know that continues to be of real interest. And we continue to try to find a way to explore and see how it could work for Vermont landowners, public and private, and municipal, by the way. There's also the Global Warming Solutions Act that's been much in the press and in the news because of its sweeping goals and the legal authority that it provides, an ability for the state to be challenged legally if it doesn't meet its climate greenhouse gas emissions targets. So that work has begun with passage of the Global Warming Solutions Act, which is to establish a climate council with advisors, et cetera, council members, to chart a course and make recommendations. There's no direct call for FPR or the forestry community here other than to pay attention, to be involved, and at FPR we are providing staff and technical input to this process. which includes us helping to understand the power of forests in storage and sequestration, the role they play, the way forests are also vulnerable to climate change, and what we might do about that in the way of adaptation and resilience, carbon offset possibilities, et cetera, and importantly, the role of good forestry in keeping forests forest and producing durable wood products that allow for storage of carbon. So we're active, if not directly called on, in the legislation, and I wanted you to be aware of that. And then looking forward to the coming session, we do not have, in my 10 years as commissioner, we've put forward some pretty significant packages of legislative policy proposals over the years. This won't be one of those years with so much going on and so much that we have done and continue to implement and normalize. We are not putting forward a big package this winter. We were looking to eagerly to see if we can come back to Act 250 reform, because that's so important throughout Vermont and our work. The governor did establish through executive order a charge to me as commissioner to propose by March an alternative to Act 250 for oversight of recreational trails. We will be doing that. We expect legislative interest and activity on that, as well as our executive action. We'll see where that goes. There are implications for forests. We're wondering what other people might be doing in the way of forest fragmentation, forest processing, among other elements of Act 250. So we'll be watching that, potentially proposing some things that are consistent with where we've been in the last several years, and we'll kind of be generally on our toes and, as ever, monitoring bills with an eye towards those that have implications for rural Vermont in particular, through forestry, forests, forest health, and outdoor recreation. So I hope that makes some sense. I hope it's not too much of a shotgun, machine gun approach here, and that it made some sense. I think I've covered the basics of where we were and where we seem to be heading, and I hope that's helpful to you. Danny, back to you, and let me know as we go if there are questions that I can cover. Thanks again, folks.
Thank you, Mike. And just a reminder to the audience, if you have a question, you can use the question box in your panel. And we're going to pass it over to Paul.
Thanks, Danny. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Paul.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, my name's Paul Frederick. I'm the wood utilization, I'm the forest economy program manager, newly renamed. It's been a really challenging and busy year for us in the program. So I just wanted to highlight a few of our bigger projects, and I'll start with the forest economy stabilization grants that Commissioner Snyder mentioned. They kept us, that program kept us pretty busy for the months between July and September. Ultimately, we provided about $3.6 million in grants to 70 forest products related businesses. To quote Sam Lincoln, it was an all hands on deck effort, which involves staff from FPR, the agency, Vermont Economic Development Authority, and heavily relied on our information technology staff. I just wanted to give a shout out and thanks to Sam, Emma Hansen, Danielle Fitzko, Kim McKee, Kristen Freeman, Emily Byrne, and Matt Chapman, who without whom's help it would not have been possible. Next. Another big ongoing effort has been our continuing work on the Vermont Loggers Safety and Workers' Compensation Program. Again, this program was championed by Sam Lincoln. It's something he actually started before he came to work for the department. The LSWC program, for those that aren't familiar with it, is available to logging businesses to help reduce the cost of workers' compensation insurance by promoting a culture of safety and ultimately reducing incidents that result in injuries. Companies are required to complete some mandatory safety training and a job site safety inspection. And having successfully done that, they're eligible to have employees classified as safety certified and essentially qualify for reduced workers' compensation premiums. Now, COVID resulted in the cancellation of most of the workshops we had planned for 2020, but we were able to hold 2 of the required classes this fall, one in Newport and one in Bethel, with very restricted numbers of participants and COVID guidelines in place. It was challenging, but it worked out well in the end. We're tentatively planning a series of workshops in the spring of 2021, and we're hopeful that those will be able to go forward. And I just wanted to point out the website down in the lower right-hand corner of the slide. Loggers, foresters, and landowners, we're encouraging you to check out our online resources. Those feature guidance on documenting workers' compensation coverage for loggers and subcontractors, and we hope are valuable to folks trying to make sure that their logging contractors are properly covered. Next. I also wanted to highlight a couple of other potential programs of potential interest and incentives. The value-added forest products businesses that are planning a project which is going to require permitting should try to check out the value-added forest products permitting assistance grants. It's a mouthful. Or the FPPA grants, as we've started calling them. The program was created in 2019 and provides assistance to forest products businesses with permitting costs associated with projects. Funding is on a first-come, first-served basis, but we still have plenty of funding available. If anyone is interested in that, best to contact Emma Hansen at emma.hansen@vermont.gov. Next. I also just wanted to put in a quick plug for the wood energy program. Just to let folks know, there's still a number of incentives and tax breaks available for both automated wood heating systems and new wood or pellet stoves. Again, here, if you have any questions, please contact Emma Hansen, our wood energy coordinator. That wraps it for me, Danny.
All right, I guess I'm next. Hello, I'm Kathy Decker, Forest Protection Program Manager, and I'm going to provide pretty much skimming the surface of updates around forest health and wildland fire. Each year we monitor forest health, insect populations, and a lot of other information to give to all of you. So hit next, please. One thing we monitor, like I said, was insect populations. This year, this is a graph showing gypsy moth egg mass counts. The bottom is calendar year, all the way on the left from 1986 to 2020, and then the average number of egg masses counted per plot. As you can see to the right, there's been a spike in 2019 and 2020 in egg mass counts. This year, we also had a fair amount of folks just calling us up and telling us about it. So I think next year or this coming 2021, we'll expect to see some defoliation from gypsy moth. So if you're in areas where oak is bountiful, you'll probably see some damage. On the right are just some pictures of the egg masses at the bottom on a bole of a tree, and the top picture is what we use to capture these egg masses, which is burlap around the tree, and you can see all of those egg masses laid under there. Next. The big insect is, of course, emerald ash borer, and just wanted to compare our 2019 to 2020. On the left is the 2019 map. In 2019, we ended up with 2 new locations, so the map ended up affecting 85 towns in 8 counties. The confirmed infested area and high-risk area is what I'm referring to as far as hitting all those towns. In 2020, we had an additional 17 locations. So now our infested area map affects 140 towns in 13 counties. The way we gather this information is by several different monitoring systems. Next. One is girdled trap trees. So our staff in U.S. Forest Service in Vermont have established trap trees each year. This past year, our staff set up 38. If you look to the map to the left, all of those dots are the locations of those trap trees. And what we do is we girdle those trees, girdle those trees in the spring of the year. And then in the fall, once the insects have been active and no longer active, we will go out and peel those trees and look for larvae under the bark. So from the 38 trees that we girdled, 2 were actually ended up with confirmed EAB. 1 was down in Bennington County, and 1 was right on the Washington-Caledonia County line. U.S. Forest Service put out 4 trap trees with 1 confirmed, again, down in the Bennington County area. Next. We also put out purple traps. I'm sure if anybody has seen anything regarding EAB, that is probably the one thing. So last year, with help from the Forest Pest First Detectors, put out 113 purple traps. 7 of those came back confirmed with EAB. Most of those are up in the islands, but 1 was also in the Washington County. 1 was down in Bennington County as well, and also Franklin County. And on the right, our staff also responds to calls about ash tree inspections. We went out and inspected at least 60 ash trees and 0 confirmed EAB from those. Next. A project we just started this year is biological control release at 2 sites. So those 2 stars are the locations where some parasitic wasps have been released. The picture on the left shows exactly what that looks like. A bolt is tied to a tree, in this case, a small diameter, and those logs have the biocontrol agent in it, and then they are then hopefully doing their job on EAB. The parasite lays its eggs in the larva of EAB and effectively killing it. So we will continue that project over time and hopefully raise a healthy population of parasites. Next. Just wanted to make folks aware that we have a new person at the Forest Biology Lab. Trish Hansen was an entomologist, worked there for a very long time. This year we brought on Savannah Ferreira, who's a pathologist. Her first year out there and 100 samples, so not too bad. And most of those were insect identification, fungal identification, and then just some general information about forest health. Next. We also deal with terrestrial invasive plants, and although we weren't able to do field work that we wanted to do for projects, Elizabeth Spinney was able to put on 5 virtual workshops with over 300 attendees. And in the bottom left-hand corner, this is the track of inquiries over the past few years. And as you can see, they continue to increase, which I think is positive that people are inquiring about invasive plants, and Elizabeth is able to assist them. Next. Just wanted to remind folks that although we've been talking about insects, one of the big impacts this year that we experienced was, this is the drought index, and just wanted to show you through this year, May, starting at the top, going across the summer, all the way down to December. We have had most of the year abnormally dry to moderately drought conditions. So although we may not have seen many impacts of that this year, don't forget about it, because I think we're going to see some impacts coming up in 2021. Next. Wildland fire instruction is one thing we're very active in doing, and unfortunately this year, this is not a picture from this year, by the way, everybody would have been masked and 6 feet apart, but we weren't able to put on as many wildland fire instructional courses as we normally do, and hopefully when we go into 2021, we'll be able to ramp that back up again. Next. We also provide fire predictive services. Picture on the left is a remote weather station. And if you can look at the map on the right, you'll see those sort of 4 white areas. Those are where those weather stations are placed. So we get daily weather information and produce a fire danger forecast all through the fire, starting in the spring and ending usually this time of the year when, hopefully when snow cover is here. Next. And given the really dry weather and the situation, we had a lot of wildland fires towards the fall. Our total reported so far were 94, and those are spread out also in the spring and the fall. Burned 133 total acres, and staff responded to 9 wildland fires. The fires they responded to were typically ground fires, meaning the fire was actually burning in the ground in the Duff area, and that really was promoted by the extreme dry weather we had over the year. I think that's all I have, and thank you for your time, and I would be glad to answer any questions that come up in the chat.
Kathy, this is Elise. There are 3 quick questions for you.
Okay.
One is the biological control of parasitic wasp from Elizabeth McLean?
Is it it's a parasitic wasp? Yes.
Second one, are you seeing large areas of EAB mortality in woodlots or in state forests?
I'm afraid I can't. I don't think we're seeing widespread death yet. I think where we have the higher populations, L.R. Jones is where we release those biocontrols. We are seeing dead trees, but I wouldn't call it at this point widespread. But that's like,
and then the last.
Yep.
The last one, what did you see for forest tent caterpillar this summer?
It's funny, I actually had that slide up, but I removed it because I didn't have enough time. Forest tent caterpillar populations are extremely low. There was really no defoliation reported, and we expect that to remain low over time, the next few years.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. This is Nate McKean. I'm the State Lands Program Manager for the Forestry Division. And our State Lands team, we're the principal drivers of planning and on-the-ground management for close to 350,000 acres of agency lands. Next slide. As you can imagine, there's a complex variety of needs, interests, and demands related to state lands management. And our team spends a significant amount of time in a number of areas, including, of course, timber management and veg management. Outdoor recreation is critical to what we do. And the infrastructure that supports the veg management and the recreation, thousands of miles of roads and trails, parking lots, and associated infrastructure. We're responsible for maintaining and upgrading. And of course, then there's the many intrinsic values, including wildlife habitat and water quality that we look out for in state lands. Next slide. Going to give you a quick year in review. I'm not sure about any of you, but for us, the year didn't go quite as we planned back in January because of COVID, but staff, to their credit, they adjusted quickly, learned to work from home, overcome some of the obstacles, and figured out how to continue our work. And not surprisingly, recreation in this past summer and fall really rose to the forefront of a lot of the primary pressures on our work and on our lands that we manage. Our outdoor recreation features were slammed, to put it bluntly, and that's a wonderful thing. Outdoor recreation is core to our mission, helps us gain support for public land management, and provides an education and a great relief to folks who are stuck at home and an understanding and awareness of the resources that we manage and that Vermont is blessed with. However, this use was also a bit of a stress test for our staff and for the resource. And as Mike mentioned at the beginning of the program, we did receive a significant amount of CARES funding, which our staff jumped at the opportunity to help us recover from the pressures from the amount of use that we saw this past year. And next slide. We actually hold off. Thanks, Danny. We spent about $1.2 million in a very short period of time, basically from September to just finishing up now, on improving our road system, trails, parking areas, and we got an amazing amount of work done in a short period of time, thanks to those CARES funds and staff's creativity and ability to pivot and take advantage of this opportunity. Next slide. We still did get some wood out. Paul is a wizard with the harvest data, and he has a whole variety of graphs and charts, which are very interesting. For the purpose of today, I'm throwing this one up there. This shows total volume of wood that our staff administered, and it includes a little bit of town support that we give, getting some town sales done, some fish and wildlife, and a lot of FPR lands. On an average over a 10-year period, last 10 years, we've been getting about 5.5 million board feet of wood out, and this year we're a little under that, but we're pretty good for all things considered, I would say. Next slide. And so right now we are closing out, just starting, or have recently awarded 15 harvests. And the next 3 slides are just a list of the 17 harvest projects on the horizon that we foresee getting out in the next year. And there's a brief summary here. I don't expect you all to be able to read this quickly, but we can get you this information. And next slide. Next slide. And one more. Well, actually, I went through those pretty quickly, but our state lands team is led by the 5 stewardship foresters. And Tim Morton is out of the Springfield office, Lisa Thornton out of the Rutland office, Lou Bushy out of the St. J office, Brad Greeno out of the Barry office, and Jason Nirenberg out of the Essex office. And these stewardship foresters, they lead a team of 3 to 4 state land staff in their districts. And they do all the land management in those districts. And I have to say, we're particularly fortunate to have these 5 folks leading the districts, and we are very blessed with the quality of state land staff that we have right now. The talent and the dedication is phenomenal. To get these CARES projects completed, they all worked many extra hours and really had to pivot away from their normal core duties. So I give them all a lot of credit and appreciate that. And we were sorry to see Sam go. Sam definitely had an impact in a number of areas with FPR. And I'll just let you know that if you are going to be bidding on state sales, be sure your workers' comp information is up to date and covers all of your employees. Thank you, Sam. And that's a wrap for state lands. For now, I'm happy to take any questions at the end. And I'm going to turn it over to Keith for private lands.
Great, thanks, Nate. As I was getting ready to prepare this I realized that in the few minutes we've got, it's really only enough time to scratch the surface. And so I think that this will turn into a teaser for a more complete update that I'll send in January that'll flesh out some of these topics. But I think this is a good way to start. Prompt some questions and invite more questions or recommendations for what to include in the update if I miss something. I also know that I've got a few questions already in the chat, and I'll try to address a few of them that I've seen. But if I don't get to all of them, we'll have a little bit more time at the end to do that. Next. So just starting off, right when COVID hit, the private lands program was working on doing some realignment. There's been a lot of interest from the consulting community and within the county forester group to be able to calibrate and deliver the program consistently and efficiently. And to help do that, we decided to move from a structure that had supervision by districts into coordinating the program by regions. And so we separated the state out into 3 different regions. And each of the counties and county foresters within the state are organized into a team that helps to coordinate on common issues and questions, and that's been really successful. Jared Nunnery is leading the team in the north, David Paganelli in the central part of the state, and Sam Shinesky in the southern part of the state. I think generally this isn't going to be something that most consulting foresters or landowners see direct impacts from, but I think overall it's going to really help us deliver better service for folks, distribute workloads more evenly, things like that. I think it's working really well, and we're just really starting to see the benefits of that. So that's great. We had a few staff changes this year, and I really, really appreciate everybody's, flexibility in coming on during this time. Corey Cregan became the Bennington County Forester in Southern Vermont. He came on from being a consulting forester with some previous history with FPR, but he's really hit the ground running in Bennington County. Emily Potter took over in Lamoille County, and she's really done well. And she's coming from several years working as the NRCS forester and with previous work with state lands before that. And she too has hit the ground running. We're in the final stages of recruitment for the Washington County Forester position, which is really exciting. And I really appreciate everybody's patience in some of the challenges we've dealt with. The vacancy that was a result of the hiring freeze during COVID, and also really appreciate the work of the county foresters who are already at capacity to be able to pitch in and help out consulting foresters and landowners to meet their needs. Unfortunately, because of COVID, because of the hiring freezes and financial challenges related to it, we did have to step away from assistance with NRCS delivery, which included 2 FPR positions. It's really too bad because NRCS is such a critical part of how private lands and landowners and consulting foresters get work done on the ground, particularly invasive plants and a lot of water quality work. We continue to be engaged with them, and we'll continue to look forward to opportunities to provide that assistance. But it's going to take some work and take some time. So we're doing and just to final comment, Dan Singleton moved from the Washington County Forester position into state lands, and Rick Dyer moved from the Lamoille County Forester position to the AMP Forester position out in the northern areas. So he's going to continue to be engaged with private landowners and loggers and consultants as well. Next. The way that we do our work has really changed. We're not working out of the office, we're working from our homes. We're working alone more often than we had. And I think for county foresters, perhaps more than others, it's really critical, the number of landowners that we work with that are from out of state, and elderly landowners, both for our own staff and protection of those that we work with. We've been really strict about how we manage working with folks as it relates to COVID. We have allowed for digital signatures and more digital submissions, and I think overall it's gone well. You'll see here we're in masks in the field. Over on the right, we're managing some files, which I think brings me to one of our really big changes. Next. Because of all the, because we're working from home, we depend on access to our files. It's been extremely challenging to provide good service when we're away from our offices. It's kind of been a long time coming, but we are now in the process of scanning all forest management plans and all maps that are currently in effect. And this is a really important step for us to be able to be responsive to folks from our homes, and move this information quickly. And right now we've got Washington County entirely scanned, Lamoille County and Windham County entirely scanned. Orleans and Franklin Grand Isle are in process. They're going to be done before the end of the month. And the remaining counties are going to be scanned over the next several months. Again, we're only scanning the current plans and current maps in effect. And we're working on a digital transition process to help incoming plans and maps be digitized, but also provide more guidance to consulting foresters and landowners about how to submit these in a way that can be processed efficiently. That's something that'll be coming out in the next few weeks. Next. The Private Lands Advisory Committee has continued to meet. They've been extremely helpful, and they've provided input on how to approach the digital transition process, what some of the questions and concerns might be, what good starting points might be, and what long-term goals would be. We continue to work on the plan template, which we've discussed for a long time, and we're working out some IT stuff so that we can really lay a strong foundation to get that in place. They've made recommendations on improving plan review timelines, efficient processes for aggregating parcels and managing plan requirements related to that, consistent approaches when converting forest land to open land, and we continue to have good discussions about engagement on forester licensing and the role of FPR in that, even when it is OPR's responsibility to administer. We will be soliciting for a new landowner and forester members in the next week or so. So please be on the lookout for that. It's been a really productive committee, and I think this next year is going to be really great. Next. And in closing, just want to kind of put a plug in for the licensing. Keep in mind the requirements when conducting your work, from stamps on plans and maps to when you're supervising a technician or representing the UVA eligibility of a parcel. I think folks are doing well, but it's really important to keep these licensing requirements in mind. Though FPR doesn't administer licensing, there is an intersection with UVA and the work that we do. I'd say keep up the good work, and appreciate that. Update letters have already started to go out. This is the second round, the UVA plan update letters. We expect that all of the counties will be out by the end of January. And just a reminder, February 1st is the deadline for forest management activity reports. They can be filled out on EQs. We've already got about 100 of them in this year from both landowners and consulting foresters. It's a really efficient way to get them in. You also have a record of the submission, and it saves on our staff capacity for the entry, for the data entry from those. That's all I've got. I think as we close out after Dave goes, we can follow up on some of the questions. I apologize I wasn't able to get to those at this moment. And that's it.
Great, thanks, Keith. Hi, everyone. My name is Elise Shadler. I am the program manager of the Urban and Community Forestry program. Next slide, please. For those of you who are unfamiliar with our program, back one, Danny. For those of you who are unfamiliar with us, we are a collaborative effort of FPR and also UVM Extension. We have 5 staff who offer a variety of technical, educational, and financial assistance primarily to municipal audiences and volunteers regarding the care and management of trees in our public spaces. We are guided by a 20-member advisory council with broad representation, and we meet quarterly with them. And we also manage 3 websites that you may be aware of: VT Community Forestry, VT Invasives, and our Vermont Woods website. Next. 2020 was certainly an interesting year, but we have by and large been able to pretty much continue to provide our services and programming across the board. In 2020, we assisted 117 municipalities, and we estimate that about 12,500 hours were volunteered by our statewide network of over 500 forest pest first detectors, tree stewards, and tree committee and board members. Next. As Commissioner Snyder mentioned in the intro, one of our major successes this year was the passage of the legislation to amend the Vermont tree warden statutes. These were, as he mentioned, first developed in 1904, and they had not really been changed at all in over 50 years, and they were definitely in need of modernizing, clarifying, and adapting. So we have a program webpage that's dedicated to the statute updates with information about the new statutes, and we have an ambitious plan for the year ahead to collaborate with the Vermont League of Cities and Towns to develop resources like the one on this slide, and to do trainings and do some really direct technical assistance to tree wardens in municipalities statewide. Next. Specifically, yesterday we announced that we will be working with 10 municipalities over the course of the next year to develop and adopt a municipal shade tree preservation plan. So this is a new feature of the amended tree warden statutes that allows municipalities to define local tree care and tree warden responsibilities. We have 4 towns that are signed on already, and we're seeking another 6 through an application process. Next. Much of our other regular technical assistance in the past year has and will continue to focus on helping municipalities to understand and begin to mitigate the impacts of emerald ash borer on their public tree populations. We have a roadside ash inventory tool app that we train and support municipal volunteers in using, and there are currently over 41,000 ash trees in the system, and over 40 towns have used the tool. In 2020, we conducted 13 inventory trainings, mostly over the web. Also of note in technical assistance, we just finished a suite of 6 case studies that highlight different approaches to municipal emerald ash borer development, plan development and management. The case studies are of communities in Vermont, Connecticut, and Ohio, and they include detailed costs for the different approaches that the towns have taken. So we hope to add some more of these case studies in the year ahead, and that these are really helpful. Next. Our financial assistance this past year was primarily focused on EAB as well. In addition to our regular Caring for Canopy grant program, we received 2 special pots of funding from the U.S. Forest Service to offer grants to towns to start to remove and replace ash trees, and also to explore urban ash tree wood utilization. at over $125,000 for the year and 19 grants total. This is the most that our program has ever been able to provide through municipal grants. But the grant rounds were also the most competitive we've ever seen. So we know that there is still a need out there. Next. One project that we wrapped up this year that I'd just like to highlight is our 5-year Resilient Right-of-Ways project. This was funded through a U.S. Forest Service grant and focused mostly on advancing and supporting green stormwater infrastructure and rural roadside vegetation management for water quality. We worked with 10 urban and 10 rural municipal partners over the course of the project, did a lot of outreach and training, and developed 2 publications through the project as well. The Vermont Green Streets Guide on the left here, and then the Resilient Right-of-Ways Guide. These are both available on our website, but are also available in hard copies if anyone is interested. Next. Another program of ours that I'll briefly mention is our Vermont Community Canopy program, which allows our program to provide free trees to residents to plant on their own properties. We partner with the Arbor Day Foundation and have also worked with the Vermont Department of Health's Climate and Health program. And over the past 4 years, we've given 1,250 trees to 645 residents, which over the course of their lifetime will cumulatively provide hundreds of thousands of benefits in energy and other benefits that these trees will provide on these properties. We hope to continue to offer this program into the future, pending on funding. Next. And finally, like everyone else, we have had to adapt our educational programming substantially due to COVID. We run Emerald Ash Borer Awareness Week annually, and this year we supported towns and volunteers from afar in running tree tagging events and other outreach events. Our annual Arbor Day conference was transitioned to a webinar series, as was a suite of planned in-person town forest recreation planning workshops. We run the Backyard Woods course, which is targeted at landowners of 25 acres or less. In the spring, we offered it free to 100 participants, and 50 additional people were set on a wait list, and those people were able to take the course this fall. And looking ahead, we're transitioning our Forest Pest First Detectors workshops to be online, as well as developing a new tree warden school to support the new and existing tree wardens. I think that is all from me, Danny. But thank you, and answer any questions at the end.
Thanks, Danny. This is Dave Wilcox, Watershed Forester. Going to talk about the Watershed Forestry Program and updates, what's been happening in 2020 and looking towards the future. Go ahead, Danny. So we, after promising the manual would be done for many years, it seemed like we finally completed it in 2019. So what's the next step with the AMPs and the AMP manual? Go ahead, Danny. We are embarking on a project to create an AMP app for smartphones. This was actually the idea for this was one of Sam Lincoln's great ideas that he had when he was here. And the idea is to put all of the AMP manual information in a easy to use app that's on your phone, easy lookups of rules, definitions and tables. And it's going to have additional tools such as being able to calculate slope with your phone, look up on the tables the appropriate, whether it's water bar spacing or width of the forest buffer. And we're also going to incorporate some job planning worksheets and cost calculations. And the great thing about the app is it's going to be easily updated. We'll have a maintenance program, with the contractor so that we can keep it updated and make it work well for multiple platforms. And it'll be free. So some of all of the great information that's in the A&P manual will be accessible on your smartphone. So we're getting started with, well, we're well into the process of writing an RFP and having a vendor work on that. So that will be coming down the pike in the next year, I would say. So next slide, Danny. We had some staff changes in 2020 relative to the AMPs and heavy cutting in the Springfield district. Rick White retired at the end of 2019, and Tim Morton, who's a stewardship forester in Springfield, and Aaron Hurst, who's a state lands forester, are now handling AMPs and heavy cutting activities in Windham and Windsor counties. And as Keith talked about and mentioned, in the St. Johnsbury and Barry district, Rick Dyer was hired in January to be the new AMP forester and heavy cut forester in the central and northeast districts. And Rick will also do state lands work in those districts. Obviously, Rick was previously the Lamoille County forester, and he has, I think, more than hit the ground running in his new role with FPR. Rick has had a lot of great experience in forest management as a consultant, as an NRCS forester, as a county forester. So he really understands the program and has done a great job in the last year. So next. So this is some information right off the website for the district contacts for heavy cut and AMP questions or technical assists. We like to get out and visit with folks before we have issues. If anybody has questions, trying to help them solve problems and be proactive in getting things done. And the photos on this slide are from this year, technical assistance and a couple bridge rental photos there. So if you're interested, if you need any of those contacts, you can get them off the website, and they're here. Take a picture of it quick because we're going to change it. Go ahead, Danny. And I want to go briefly through the AMP monitoring and enforcement program for 2019. This is every year we keep track, and because we're still in 2020, we don't have the final tally, so to speak. It's running about the same, maybe a few more total number of AMP activities, but in 2019, these are the rundown of complaints investigated. And of those, 11 had discharges. 1 of those cases went to enforcement, and we had 17 voluntary technical assistance visits for a total of 43 AMP activities. So next slide. We've been seeing the trends. This is the last 16 years of AMP trends in cases investigated and evidence of discharge, and you can see they're on the downhill trend, which is good. Next slide. And cases referred to enforcement has dropped. Forward 1 slide. And so the cases referred has dropped significantly, and the request for technical assistance has increased. So what this tells me is people are calling up and getting assistance before there's problems. And I think in general, as time goes on, the practice has increased. We get out there and we do education and outreach, and every little bit helps. Next slide. We also keep track of where the non-compliance is in the AMP investigations are located, and these aren't necessarily all discharge related, but it could be not enough water bars or lack of water bars. So we see that most of the non-compliance is related to stream buffers, stream crossings, and skid trails. So obviously, that's where we know we need to do a lot of our outreach. Next slide. And we have done quite a bit of work recently trying to get skidder bridges out to the logging community. We provided cost share bridges in 2018 and 2019, and we will continue in 2021. We had some of the cost share in 2019 spilled over into 2020, but we're going to be putting some more cost share grants out. So look for those, and I'll notify everybody through our email chain and so on. But we'll have wooden bridges available and temporary steel bridges available. In the photos there, you can see the different kinds of bridges. So stay tuned for the next round of those grants. Next slide. And we also have in Vermont 2 rental bridge programs. And the temporary wooden skidder bridges that have been available through the Vermont Natural Resource Conservation Districts are still available. They're a little bit limited compared to what they used to be. A lot of the bridges, the original bridges, are pretty worn out. We're trying to find ways to help get those, get some funding to rebuild those supplies. And also, I'm looking for feedback on how much that program is relied upon. And, we hear from loggers, some loggers want to own them, or land managers want to have a supply of them that they can be assured that they're available and they don't have to see if the rental bridge is there. And then we have some loggers that say, I'd really just rather rent a bridge than have to lug it around with me everywhere I go. So if folks have some feedback, I'd be very interested in hearing that. You can email me or call me up about that or with some of that information. So and then we also have heavy duty steel bridges available from the department. And these are bridges that we own, that we rent to loggers or foresters, landowners. We have to have a rental agreement, and there's typically a bond, a bond, I guess. And these 3 pictures are bridges that have been out this year. Actually, 2 of those are still in place, being rented. One in Northfield and one down in I'm not sure if it's Rochester or Stockbridge, but next slide. And if you want more information on the bridge rentals, go to our website. It's got a lot of information there. Just Google Vermont Acceptable Management Practices. Our website is, in general, the department website has a lot of information on it. All of the programs have a page or multiple pages. So that's where I recommend going for information. Next slide. Back one. There you go. And as everybody has said, we're all ready to get back out there and visit with folks. Hopefully 2021 will see us having in-person trainings. We're planning workshops for some heavy cutting information, whether it's applications or so on, hazardous materials management and spills. We're always interested in AMP workshops and skidder bridges. And if anybody has any ideas about what they're interested in, let us know. Shoot me an email or give me a call. Next slide. And I'll leave you with this meme that Sam put together. We hope to see you in the woods soon and get things back a little closer to normal. So thanks a lot. That's it, Danny.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you, everybody. I think we're going to go into question and answer mode right now while we just going to turn on our cameras. I apologize for a couple times advancing the slides before everybody was ready. When I was trying to manage questions, I mistakenly then would advance slides. So I haven't been managing the questions all along the way. So we'll try and get at them now. Let's see. Commissioner Snyder, you have a question up. It says, when would you anticipate being able to evaluate the forest carbon and sequestration topic with the context of UVA?
When would we be able to evaluate it for UVA? Is that the question? I'm not quite sure. So we're doing that now. That has been, forgive me if I'm not quite getting the question. I'll give you this answer and fine tune it tune me if you need something other. What I would say is, as we have looked at the possibility of enrolling private and/or state or municipal lands into offset markets, we've considered the requirements and the limits, thresholds, and various constraints on land. So which includes looking very carefully at the current use program. One of the main findings of the legislative working group, the Vermont Forest Carbon Sequestration Working Group that I chaired, and we delivered a report on last January to the legislature. One of its main findings was, it turns out that if you want to be careful, that we made a point to say that it turns out that lands enrolled in current use for forestry are not ineligible because of that enrollment in forest carbon offsets. So just because you're in current use doesn't mean you can't be in an offset project if you are otherwise eligible. So that's good. But the other side of it is, we were informed and we tried to make it known that you want to be careful with making changes to current use. For example, if current use requires some sort of carbon management, it would likely render enrolled lands ineligible for enrollment in carbon offset projects. So that was a key finding that we produced there. And so it's informed us as we move forward. We want to maintain the integrity of current use and the ability for Vermont landowners to enroll. And we want to look for opportunities for landowners who wish to enroll their UVA, their current use enrolled lands, into offset projects if they wish. And right now it appears possible. But I think the question might also be getting at the idea that current use would have a separate category for carbon somehow. And that's where indeed it gets tricky, that it depends on how we would do that, because we wouldn't want to render ineligible Vermont forest landowners because of their enrollment in current use. Danny, I'm happy to take follow-up. I know it's a little clunky. If we were in the same room, we would have resolved this by now, but doing our best here. I hope that helped.
Yes, there are some challenges, certainly, not being in the room together. We don't have as many questions, so if you do have a question, I think we can also use the raise your hand and we can unmute you. So if we want to try that approach right now, we can do that. If you look in your panel, there was, so feel free to raise your hand and we'll try and unmute you. There was one question also from Russell Ray asking about the status of the landslide at Cotton Brook. Our stewardship forester, Brad Greeno, who oversees that district, is not on with us today. I can tell you that it is still active. Our geologists in the area say it's still active. We recently did have to remove a bridge that was for the Foster's Trail because it was at risk because of the movement of the landslide. We can't predict exactly what's going to happen next, but we are just being cautious and have closed down the recreation trails in that area. I don't know, Mike, if you wanted to add any more, being a local too to the area.
No, you covered it, Danny. That's right. We're understanding as it continues to be monitored, it's still somewhat unstable, still kind of settling out, including discharges. And it has completely eliminated a huge section of a very popular and important recreational trail. And we're, evaluating how we might respond to that. I think we're going to probably have to accept that that section of Foster's Trail is not going to go back. We would look to see how we could provide other in a different place. But stay tuned on that. And as you said, the bridge project was a big one with an important decision because it ultimately came down to the fact that it may have caused, it was vulnerable to causing further problems with as a dam itself as it failed, and we didn't want to add or exacerbate the problem up there.
Thank you, and Dave Wilcox, you were involved in that as well. We have a question from Alex Barrett, and I'm going to try and unmute you right now, see if that works. I sent you a request to unmute, Alex.
Wow, it hopefully is working.
There you are.
What is FPR's plan to staff and support partnerships with NRCS to help implement forest management practices in the state? That's a pretty significant hole right now that's sort of a bottleneck for a lot of work that could be happening.
I could start it, and Keith, you may want to fill in on that. I think in Keith's presentation, he recognized that we did have to pull staff away from our work with NRCS and developing and implementing plans and contracts. Right now, we don't have a plan in place to have our staff engaged in implementing NRCS programs, but we're certainly engaged in supporting NRCS in their implementation of their programs. We're not sure if the things may change in the future. Right now, with the hiring freeze and our capacity, we had to pull our staff into our core forest program areas. Fish and Wildlife is still very much engaged and has picked up a lot of the work that we were implementing. So hopefully we will continue to stay engaged with NRCS, but I'm not sure exactly what capacity that will look like with staffing. Keith, do you want to add anything else to that?
I guess more in the line of questions, I think it's helpful to know if there is good work that's not able to get done. I'd appreciate hearing more about that. And also, Fish and Wildlife is partnering with some NRCS staff as well as Wild Turkey Federation staff that are working on helping support these projects. And I think it's important that we're confident that whatever strategy is being used, that it's effective. And if it feels like there's room for improvement, or if you feel like specifically FPR staff is uniquely positioned to be effective in supporting that, to let us know why and how, because that can help us consider, if we don't have plans, how to get plans, or under what circumstances it might be the right fit again.
Thank you. Anybody else want to have a question? You want to raise your hand? Well, I don't want to drag it out longer. Oh, we do have a question coming in from Lynn Levine. I'm going to send you a request, Lynn, to connect to audio. Thank you.
So I was wondering what chances why
Lynn, can you start again?
I was wondering why the thoughts are about the gypsy moth population had increased so dramatically at this point, and what the predictions might be.
I think that was about gypsy moth population.
Right.
Yep.
And I mean, they've sort of been on an incline for the past 3 years. We were actually kind of surprised at the level of egg masses that we were counting at these areas, especially when we weren't really seeing any level of defoliation this year. So I think we're just really anticipating that there's a lot of gypsy moth out there, and that it will probably show up and be apparent this year, probably in the northwest section of Vermont, in southern Vermont. Not much oak up in the northeast kingdom. I'm not sure if I hit all of that, Danny, if you can, if somebody missed part of that.
Lynn, did you have any follow-up on that?
No, I think you answered my question. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Okay. don't see any more questions coming in right now. So with that,
Can I jump in, Danny? I think there's one question for everybody from Chris Fife was, great to hear about digital files. Any other positive changes to FPR put in place due to COVID that you think will persist? I don't know if other programs feel like there might be some.
I'm happy to have everybody share. I think we learned some lessons, in particular, I would say, on state lands and implementing some big projects pretty quickly. And we'll be making some improvements in our internal operations with contracting and purchasing and being able to move big projects forward in the future. So systems improvements, great opportunity to get these great projects down on the ground. And so we'll be making those improvements into the future. And the UVA digitization, actually, we were planning on doing that before COVID hit, but it was fortunate that we had already been sort of thinking about it and lining up for that. So we'll just need to continue to finalize digitizing those files. And also, I know you've heard about it, Keith mentioned it. We have still been working hard on our template update for UVA plans, and we've just really made a big investment in updating our database that will support the template. So there are some good systems that we're improving that aren't necessarily daylighted just yet, but they'll be coming. I don't know if anyone else wants to share any other improvements we've made.
I was just going to
mention.
Go ahead, Keith.
ANR Atlas has all of the UVA parcels, both ag land and forest land, now mapped, and that's available for folks. And I think that's probably going to be helpful in kind of lining up initial management plans and maps, or at least providing some background context for that stuff. So hopefully that's helpful for folks and came out of this as well.
I was just going to chime in quickly that for another point about internal operations, we've all quickly became practiced at meeting remotely and working remotely. And I would really say that we're more connected now than we were prior to COVID, just because we're comfortable with all the tools that we were slowly warming up to before, but there was no real impetus or desire to grab hold of it and make it part of our daily lives like it is now. So I think that is a big plus for us going forward. It's going to save a lot of miles having to drive everywhere just to have a meeting. And face-to-face is, you can't beat it, but it's not required to get a good meeting done or get good work done.
I'd also add that we have been working internally on improving our communication system so we can better communicate with all of our partners. So in the next couple months, hopefully you'll be seeing some established communication channels that we'll be using to communicate more regularly with you. Any other questions that I might have missed?
Thank you. Open to suggestions too. They don't have to just be questions.
Yeah, absolutely. You can use the hand raising feature.
I posed a few questions.
No, you go ahead, Dave.
Okay, I just want to say I posed a few questions and asked for some response in my presentation. So, I mean, obviously not expecting that now, but shoot me an email or call me if you have ideas. That's one of the goals of today, is to get some feedback from folks. So thanks.
Nate, I was going to point out that I think we all have learned these lessons about the virtual world, but you know, there's just way fewer donuts this way. And I guess, but now that Sam's gone, we don't have anybody to bring us the good donuts. So yeah. I guess it all works out.
We did have one more question come in, hand raised for Rick Kelly. So I'm gonna try and get you on. This should have sent you a request, Rick.
This is a question for anyone, but how will FPR reconcile wood burning in conjunction with the Global Warming Solutions Act?
Suppose I can take that. You know, we will do so by taking a total view and helping others take the sort of true cost and full cost accounting view of all inputs and outputs. So if you measure at the smokestack, wood energy is probably not going to win. But if you measure at the continent and the forested region level, then it's a whole different equation if you follow. We would make the point that, and by the way, we differentiate just wood burning from advanced or modern wood heating, for example. And when we say advanced or modern wood heat, we're acknowledging we have still a relatively cold place. We have spaces to heat, and that modern or advanced wood heat is clean burning with respect to the atmosphere at the highest levels, best in class, and it's efficient with respect to the use of trees and wood in the burning. So we promote that as an intelligent, when I use the word offset, because that gets confusing, right? But as a displacement of fossil fuels. It also empowers local forest economies and contributes to the tending of our woods and uses the weeds, as Paul might say, to put them to use in a local added way. So we just would ask people to think beyond just the simplicity of, well, you burn trees, you put carbon in the atmosphere. It does. We want to do that carefully and thoughtfully and efficiently. But it's the equation is a lot better when you consider, again, the sort of true cost and the total inputs versus using fossil fuels. So whereas some have said, geez, it's not carbon neutral, and some have said it is, our point would be, well, you all can worry about that. We would just simply say it's pretty clear that it's carbon better by a far shot, and we'll go with that. Paul, on behalf of Emma, would you add anything or correct anything that I said there?
No, I think that covers it pretty well, Mike. Think of wood as a solar battery, just another way of storing solar power. Emma makes a good point in that respect, and basically it is solar energy. It's just stored in a form that we can utilize at a later time.
So, I mean, to close the loop here with Rick, he did ask about the Global Warming Solutions Act, and, you know, it's about reducing emissions. So we will, as we participate in the process as technical experts providing information, this is part of our work with them, is to try to provide this balanced, science-based totality of an analysis of carbon throughout the carbon cycle, including the use of wood for heating and other, and even electric generation. So we will engage and try to keep this kind of rational view as part of that mix as they continue to move ahead with the Global Warming Solutions Act. I hope that helps, Rick.
Thank you, Mike and Paul. And Mike, I can't remember if you shared it earlier in your introduction, but we are pleased that we onboarded Ali Kasiba during stay-at-home orders, and she is our new climate forester and has just been a fantastic addition to our team, and has an absolute science mind, but also an excellent communicator. So she's really been our lead in helping us communicate the information that we have on the value of Vermont's forests.
Thanks, Danny. I did forget to include that, and I meant to, especially with regard to the Global Warming Solutions Act, because she's working on her heavily now. Ali is, it's Dr. Kasiba. She has, you know, strong, as Danny suggests, you know, strong scientific academic credentials, is a great communicator, but also gets the working forest elements here and is a very, very, very good piece of our puzzle here. And we're pleased to have funding from the American Forest Foundation, or the American Forest, to help us with this climate fellow position that Ali is fulfilling as a forester on our staff.
I think now that we've just hit time, and I don't see any more hands raised, so I just want to thank everybody for joining us here today. Certainly our team that was here presenting and sharing across all programs, and the bigger team behind us that is really doing a lot of work on the ground, working with you and across all of our programs. I'm just grateful for everybody's perseverance and strength and resilience during these times. And stay safe. There is light at the end of this, and we look forward to getting out in the woods with you soon. And please feel free to reach out to us anytime, and feedback is always welcome. We want to hear from you.
Thanks
Thank
all.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
Great job, team. Thank you.
Thank you.